A situation whereby having a GAAR would help, and I don't think taxpayers really should complain.
Eugene, let's start with you with some insights from an international perspective, and we can touch upon specific references to GAAR and limitation of benefit provisions, etc.
Yes.
From there.
That's right. Thanks, Bala. I think, yeah, so definitely unilateral actions to me is one of the biggest centerpieces of concerns that taxpayer would have these days. And I know, and actually it is, it's like you look at the BEPS actions, you look at what companies are having to do to respond to that. But the concern then is that with BEPS actions that are supposedly supposed to be coordinated, how then are they to be coordinated when you have various countries who might be introducing their own version of unilateral measures in advance of what other countries are doing? And although you may have the, say, like Action Plan 14 under BEPS that is supposed to provide for some kind of framework under bilateral arrangements and treaty resolution processes might take place, but then unilateral actions, I think the key question is that, are they actually covered? Are they covered? And if they're not covered, how then does taxpayers go about doing their dispute resolution? Is it going to make things worse? And if it is not covered under the existing action plans or the framework, what then do we do? Do we want to mandate a process by which, let's say, Australia, who wants to have their own version of a unilateral action on say a taxpayer on marketing hubs, for example, would they then have to ensure that they allow the taxpayer the fair due process, whereby the ATO would then be obliged to go talk to the Singapore tax authorities to ensure then that the taxpayer is not then unjustly penalized, rightly or wrongly, for whatever they're doing commercially.
And when you talk about unilateral measures, when India introduced equalization levy,
yes,
it's a kind of levy which is outside of the Income Tax Act.
Yes,
it's outside of the treaty provisions.
yes.
So how do you consider the economic effects of it? One is the administrative aspects of getting the dispute resolved.
Yes.
But it leads to what is called as double taxation or multiple taxation.
Yes. Exactly.
So the unilateral measures also have an economic aspect to it.
That's right.
So is there a mitigation strategy that the taxpayer should look at, or is just the way of life and it adds to the cost of business and therefore not worry about it?
I think short of choosing not to do business in India or with India, you really is something that you probably have to live with it and really figure out over time, whether through lobbying efforts, through the industry, whether there might be ways for some mitigation measures to take place so that you do not then suffer the financial consequences of it. I mean, and it was interesting because the equalization levy came about at a time whereby various other countries were introducing their own measures to really take into account digital businesses and how you got to deal with it. Australia dealt with it first, and then you had Korea, Japan, even China to some extent, I think, and everyone's looking at these things to try and ensure then that so-called a level playing field. But if you look at it from other countries' perspective, I think if I remember correctly, Japan and Korea, for example, those are systems whereby you do not. It's actually through a VAT mechanism, whereby you actually do have a system whereby it is possible to have some recoverable credits. But whereas then around the same time when India then decided to introduce equalization levies, you then have a situation whereby they've chosen their own path, they've chosen a different mechanism, and then over time, how does that then synchronize with what taxpayers may be used to in various other jurisdictions? So I would say it's a bit of a way of life. It is in this current world whereby part and parcel of this framework or unilateral actions that we talked about as well. And how is it then going to allow people to better accept it? You got to figure out ways of mitigation. What are your ways of dispute resolution? And I think it's just a challenge.
And when we also talk about unilateral measures and provisions like GAAR, India is going to
Yes.
come up with the GAAR provisions are going to be effective next year.
Yes.
And somewhere we also heard Mike Williams today
Yes.
talk about the treaty override.
Yes.
And that's not something which is internationally accepted. Having entered into an economic bilateral treaty, which is for the trade and investment,
Yes.
now to come in a domestic law and remove it,
Yes.
or remove the benefits
Yes.
through GAAR provisions,
Yes.
despite the fact that the treaty provisions may have stronger limitation of benefit provisions.
Yes.
Would you look at that as draconian, or would it gel well with the anti-abuse discussions going on globally,
Yes.
vis-a-vis the BEPS discussions that we have kind
right.
of heard in the last 2-3 years?
I think this is the day and age whereby whatever commercial arrangements that you pursue, I think companies have to ensure that they are pursuing a path of proper substance, and that they are able to substantiate the key commercial factors that are leading them to actually enter into whichever arrangements that they deem fit for purposes of their business. And of course, when you deal with any commercial arrangements, there are a multitude of factors that you consider, including, at the end of the day, whether as a byproduct or as a subsidiary product, the financial consequence, which can include the cost of doing business like taxes. I think that's very important to consider, and I think everyone recognizes that. Now, I think where taxpayers are probably concerned about is the fact that when you have something like the GAAR, whether in India or any other countries, are there clear enough rules whereby they don't feel that they're being targeted, victimized in a sense, whereby even if they had what they believe is a substantive commercial arrangement, they are still having to be dragged through a significant, lengthy dispute resolution process, whereby someone may have just decided that because GAAR is available as a tool, you decide that you needed to invoke it to then review the businesses unnecessarily and stuff like that. I think, draconian or not, that's probably the kind of scenario whereby it's not welcome. Certainly, I think if in this day and age you are implementing shell structures for which the only and primary reason is really a fiscal benefit like taxes, then I think you do have that situation whereby having a GAAR would help, and I don't think taxpayers really should complain.
So it's a question of clarity,
Yes.
and a transparency that
Yes.
we expect,
Yes.
both from a rule making
Yes.
and from an implementation perspective.
Yes.
I think if those are very clear,
Yes.
the economic effect of it
Yes.
can be handled through the business processes.
Yes, I understand.
Lastly, we in fact had a very jovial discussion on too many changes like GAAR,
Yes.
POEM.
Yes.
In that list,
Yes.
GST is also added,
Yes.
with a global presence, with a large India
Yes.
effect for you. How are you coping up with GST, and what would be your 1 or 2 drivers for your local team
Yes.
from a GST implementation perspective?
That's right. That's right. I think the time is ticking to April 1st, 2017, and I mean, if indeed that will still be the date on which the implementation and there's no delay, then obviously there's very little time left from now in October, right? And I think the key questions taxpayers will have is the fact that when are we going to get final clarity on what the rules are going to be in terms of the law, the transitional arrangements. Are there any anti-profiteering provisions that will come that businesses have to take into account? And you need all that for planning, because it's not only just about planning your systems. You need to plan your business arrangements. You need to look at your contracts, your tax clauses, and what impact it might then have on your business transactions in terms of how you bill your customers, how you quote your customers, and whether there needs to be any further negotiations in terms of the pricing arrangements that you have with your customers, so to speak. And I think that is all made just a bit more difficult simply because it's taken a long time for India to come to where it is today. And then when the closer you get to the deadline, the scarcer the resources, internal or external, available for companies to be able to procure and able to deal with the changes required. I think it's going to be an exciting few months. And let's see
We
what
have a lot
happens.
of things starting on April 1st.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of things start.
Absolutely.
And I think
we are
as we discussed, the only convergence is the date.
the only convergence is the date. There's divergence everywhere else.
Exactly.
Nice. Thank you very much.
No
Eugene.
problem, Bala.
Thank you very
Great
much to
chatting to
Tax
you.
Sutra for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.